opens on what appears to be a perfectly ordinary morning at the bank. Yet, there is a subtle undercurrent of anticipation that suggests something unusual is about to unfold. Lucy arrives with her characteristic energy, slightly breathless, already mid-conversation as she enters, carrying both her handbag and an exaggerated sense of purpose, as though she has decided that today must somehow become more significant than yesterday. Viv, who is accustomed to Lucy's dramatic entrances, greets her calmly but studies her expression carefully, recognizing the signs of a brewing scheme. Mr. Mooney, already seated in his office, peers through the glass partition with guarded suspicion, knowing from long experience that Lucy's enthusiasm often precedes unexpected complications. The central conflict begins when Lucy overhears a conversation about a special internal review scheduled at the bank. The review, intended to evaluate employee efficiency and performance, is described as routine, but Lucy immediately interprets it as something far more consequential. In her imagination, it transforms into a high-stakes assessment that could determine promotions, reputations, and perhaps even job security. Without confirming any of this information, Lucy leaps to the conclusion that she must ensure she stands out as indispensable. Her imagination inflates the importance of the review to near catastrophic proportions, and from that moment forward, every action she takes is colored by her determination to prove her exceptional value. Lucy begins subtly at first, attempting to improve her desk organization, rehearsing professional greetings, and offering unsolicited assistance to coworkers in an effort to appear proactive. However, her desire to exceed expectations quickly spirals into overcompensation. She volunteers for tasks that do not require volunteers, inserts herself into processes already functioning smoothly, and rearranges minor procedures under the belief that she is optimizing efficiency. Viv watches with growing concern, recognizing that Lucy's frantic productivity may do more harm than good. She gently suggests that consistency and reliability often impress more than dramatic gestures, but Lucy, convinced that dramatic gestures are precisely what will set her apart, dismisses the advice. The situation escalates when Lucy decides that the review committee must be shown a model of perfect teamwork. Without fully coordinating with anyone, she attempts to orchestrate a carefully choreographed display of harmony within the bank. She assigns roles to co-workers, coaches them on how to respond to hypothetical questions, and even practices synchronized movements behind the counter to create an illusion of seamless cooperation. Her elaborate rehearsal sessions quickly create confusion rather than cohesion, as employees struggle to remember lines they never needed in the first place. Mr. Mooney becomes increasingly aware that Lucy's preparations are disrupting the normal rhythm of the workplace. When he confronts her, Lucy passionately explains that she is safeguarding the bank's reputation and ensuring that they all shine under scrutiny. Mooney attempts to clarify that the review is merely procedural and does not require theatrical presentation, but Lucy's imagination has already elevated it into an event of epic proportions. Her conviction is so strong that even Mooney begins to question whether he underestimated the importance of the review, though he quickly regains his skepticism. As the day of the review arrives, Lucy's anxiety reaches its peak. She arrives earlier than usual, meticulously dressed, her desk polished to unnatural perfection. She instructs everyone to remain alert and coordinated. When the review representatives finally enter, Lucy greets them with exaggerated professionalism, speaking with formal precision that contrasts sharply with her usual spontaneity. Initially, her composure appears impressive. The reviewers observe quietly, taking notes as Lucy efficiently processes transactions and assists customers. However, the strain of maintaining this heightened performance soon reveals cracks. Lucy becomes overly attentive, interrupting routine procedures to demonstrate additional innovations she has introduced. She explains minor changes as groundbreaking improvements, drawing attention to adjustments that no one asked for. Her enthusiasm overwhelms the structured calm the reviewers expect. A small mistake, perhaps a misfiled document, or an overcomplicated explanation triggers a domino effect of nervous corrections. In attempting to fix a trivial issue, Lucy inadvertently exposes the unnecessary complexity she introduced earlier. Viv steps in discreetly to restore balance, calmly clarifying procedures and reassuring customers. Mr. Mooney reasserts authority with measured confidence, guiding the review back to its intended simplicity. Lucy, realizing she may have overplayed her role, tries to retreat gracefully but finds herself entangled in her own elaborate preparations. The comedic climax emerges when one of her rehearsed teamwork demonstrations accidentally unfolds in front of the reviewers, revealing the artificial coordination she imposed. The absurdity of the spectacle contrasts sharply with the straightforward competence the reviewers actually value. Yet, as often happens, Lucy's genuine qualities ultimately salvage the situation. When a real, unscripted challenge arises, perhaps a confused client requiring patience and empathy, Lucy responds instinctively and sincerely, abandoning rehearsed perfection. Her natural warmth, quick thinking, and authentic desire to help shine through. The reviewers observe this moment closely, recognizing that while Lucy's theatrics were unnecessary, her underlying dedication and adaptability are genuine strengths. After the review concludes, the atmosphere shifts into one of cautious relief. Lucy braces for criticism, prepared to accept responsibility for her overzealous preparations. Instead, the feedback is balanced. While her attempts to over-engineer efficiency were unnecessary, her enthusiasm and commitment are commended. Mr. Mooney delivers a restrained lecture about trusting established systems, emphasizing that competence does not require spectacle. Lucy listens more attentively than usual, absorbing the lesson that sometimes excellence lies in steadiness rather than showmanship. In the quieter aftermath, Lucy reflects on her motivations. She admits to Viv that her fear of being overlooked drove her to exaggerate her importance. Viv gently reminds her that her value has never depended on theatrics. It lies in her resilience, creativity, and heart. This conversation reveals subtle character growth, as Lucy acknowledges that insecurity often fuels her grand schemes. For once, she openly questions whether she sometimes complicates situations to feel indispensable. The episode closes with a humorous but telling final moment. Lucy, newly resolved to trust simplicity, notices a minor irregularity on a ledger. Her eyes sparkle with familiar curiosity. She pauses, visibly debating whether to intervene. The camera lingers as she takes a breath, glances toward Viv, and instead of launching into immediate action, calmly hands the ledger to the appropriate department. The restraint is small but meaningful. Just as she turns away, another unusual detail catches her eye, and the faintest grin appears, signaling that while she may be learning moderation, her curiosity remains undefeated. Season 6, Episode 21 ultimately explores the tension between performance and authenticity. Lucy's desire to prove herself leads her into exaggerated preparation, yet it is her unpolished sincerity that earns genuine respect. The episode reinforces a recurring theme. Growth for Lucy does not mean abandoning her dramatic instincts, but learning when to temper them. Her journey continues to balance chaos and competence, ensuring that even as she matures, the spark that drives the show's humor and heart remains intact. Following that final moment of restraint, the narrative does not simply end on Lucy's small victory. Instead, it lingers in the aftermath, allowing the emotional and thematic weight of the episode to settle more deeply. Lucy returns to her desk, outwardly calm, but internally still buzzing with thoughts. For perhaps the first time in a long while, she is not thinking about what she should do next, but rather about what she has already done. Replaying the day's events with surprising clarity, each exaggerated plan, each unnecessary adjustment, and each moment of near disaster comes back to her in fragments. And instead of brushing them off with humor, she actually examines them, which creates a rare sense of stillness in her usually fast-moving mind. Viv notices this shift almost immediately. She doesn't interrupt it right away, choosing instead to observe Lucy from a distance, recognizing that this quiet reflection is something valuable, something that cannot be forced or rushed. When she finally approaches, her tone is softer than usual, less corrective and more supportive as she asks Lucy what she is thinking about. Lucy hesitates before answering, which in itself is unusual, and then admits that she is trying to understand why she felt such an intense need to impress the reviewers, even when no one had asked her to do anything out of the ordinary. This moment opens up a deeper layer of the episode's emotional core. Lucy begins to articulate something she rarely expresses directly, a fear of being seen as ordinary, or worse, unnecessary. She explains that when she heard about the review, she imagined a scenario where everyone else would perform perfectly and she would fade into the background, unnoticed. That fear, she realizes, is what pushed her to overcompensate, to turn a simple situation into something grand and complicated. As she speaks, there is a mix of embarrassment and relief, as though putting the feeling into words helps her see it more clearly. Viv responds not with criticism, but with perspective. She gently reminds Lucy that being dependable and genuine often carries more weight than being spectacular. She points out that the reviewers were most impressed not by Lucy's rehearsed routines, but by her spontaneous interaction with the customer the moment when she stopped trying to perform and simply helped. This observation lands differently than similar advice has in the past, perhaps because Lucy is already in a reflective state, more open to understanding rather than defending herself. Meanwhile, Mr. Mooney, who has been pretending not to listen, processes this conversation in his own way. Though he would never openly admit it, Lucy's honesty and self-awareness leave an impression on him. He has spent so much time reacting to her chaos that he rarely considers the motivations behind it. Hearing her acknowledge her own tendencies even partially causes him to reassess his assumptions. While he remains cautious, there is a subtle softening in his attitude, reflected in the way he later interacts with her, not as someone waiting for the next mistake, but as someone cautiously observing potential improvement. As the workday winds down, the environment of the bank returns to its normal rhythm, but there is a noticeable difference in Lucy's behavior. She continues performing her tasks, but with a quieter focus. She asks questions instead of assuming answers. She checks details before acting. These are small adjustments, almost invisible to anyone who isn't paying close attention, but they represent a significant internal shift. The comedy here becomes more understated, relying less on exaggerated mishaps and more on the tension between Lucy's instincts and her efforts to control them. Of course, the episode does not allow this balance to remain entirely stable. Just when it seems that Lucy has achieved a new level of composure, a final situation emerges, something minor, almost trivial, yet perfectly designed to test her restraint. It could be a discrepancy in a report, a confusing instruction, or an unusual request from a client, something that sparks her curiosity immediately. The camera lingers on her reaction, emphasizing the familiar spark in her eyes, the quick mental leap from observation to possibility. But this time, instead of acting instantly, Lucy pauses. That pause becomes the defining moment of the episode's conclusion. You can almost see the internal debate playing out. One part of her urging her to jump in, to fix, to improve, to make the situation more interesting. Another part reminding her of the chaos that followed her earlier attempts. It is not an easy decision. Her instincts are strong, and they are a fundamental part of who she is. Yet, slowly, deliberately, she chooses a different path. She turns to Viv, not to announce a plan, not to take control, but to ask. It's a small gesture, but it carries enormous significance. For Lucy, asking instead of acting represents a shift from impulsive independence to collaborative awareness. Viv responds with a simple, practical solution, and together they resolve the issue quickly and efficiently, without complication. The simplicity of the resolution contrasts sharply with the elaborate chaos Lucy created earlier, reinforcing the episode's central theme. Not every situation needs to be transformed in order to be meaningful. Mr. Mooney, witnessing this exchange, allows himself a rare moment of visible approval. It's subtle, a slight nod, a softened expression, but for him, it is a clear acknowledgement that Lucy is capable of growth, even if that growth comes in small, inconsistent steps. As the day finally comes to an end, Lucy gathers her things, her energy returning in a more balanced form. She jokes with Viv about how she nearly turned a routine review into a full-blown theatrical production, and there is laughter. But it is gentler now, less defensive. The humor feels earned rather than forced, as if Lucy is no longer using it to deflect criticism, but to genuinely reflect on the absurdity of her own actions. And then, just before she leaves, it happens. One last detail catches her eye, something small, something curious. Her expression shifts, instantly curiosity lighting up her face, her imagination already beginning to spin possibilities. For a brief moment, it looks like everything she has learned might be forgotten, like she is about to dive headfirst into another elaborate scheme. But then she pauses again. This time, the pause is shorter, but it's there. She smiles to herself, shakes her head slightly, and walks away. The camera lingers on that empty space where she stood, leaving the audience with a sense of balance rather than resolution. Lucy hasn't changed completely, she never will. Her curiosity, her imagination, her tendency toward chaos are still very much alive. But now, there is something new alongside them, awareness. Season 6, Episode 21 closes not with a dramatic transformation, but with a subtle evolution. Lucy remains the same at her core, but she is beginning to understand herself in a deeper way. The episode suggests that growth is not about eliminating flaws, but about recognizing them, working with them, and occasionally choosing a different path, even if only for a moment. And in Lucy's case, that moment is enough to make all the difference, while still leaving plenty of room for the next disaster waiting just around the corner.